This show is brought to you by DF Studios Limited. Whether you're a business owner or entrepreneur, DF Studios will guide and assist you on the best ways to promote your brand digitally, in addition to creating visitor and customer generating content like blogs, social media posts, videos, and even podcasts like this one you're listening to right now. Visit dfstudiosltd.com or hit up info@dfstudiosltd.com for more info. And last but not least, Malcolm X, man. This is I would say,
Whew.
the true magnum opus of, the legendary filmmaker, Spike Lee, man.
Yeah.
This is like the second Spike Lee joint that I'll be talking about, I should say, on this program here, right? Because 2 years ago we talked about Do the Right Thing, right?
Yeah.
And I specifically remember saying that I needed to rewatch Malcolm X in terms of making, of just more or less, stating the obvious, which film is the better of the two, right? And I mean, we all know what the answer is. It's this film, right?
Yeah.
And this film is actually going to be turning 30 this month, right? And it's actually going to be released through the Criterion Collection. They have this 4K re-release that's this 4K edition that they're going to be putting out in a couple of weeks, I believe it is.
I'm
And
still mad. I'm still mad that we're just getting it looks like right now that we're just getting the 4K, not the. I blame Warner Brothers, but I really was hoping that we would also get like a Criterion DVD or even like a Criterion Blu-ray as well. But it looks like we're just getting the 4K and maybe a Blu-ray, which.
Yeah, no, well, I always assume when it comes to those releases, where it's just the 4K and the Blu-ray, at least there's a DVD option. But I could be wrong. I really should look it up and see, right?
It
But
hasn't.
yeah,
It wasn't that way for Citizen Kane.
oh right. I remember that was the first release with that, right? Yeah.
Yep, and I think part of the
Um,
problem is rights issues because Warner Brothers, which is ironic, and you'll probably get into this. Like when you think about how much grief Warner Brothers gave Spike Lee about making this movie, it's ironic that they're the ones that, through their copyright and legal bullshit, are probably the ones holding up Criterion being able to put this out on
Yeah,
DVD as
and
well as Blu-ray.
especially egregious with who in charge right now, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Oof.
oh yeah. Right. So, for me, right, because this is a retrospect review after all, right? I knew when this film came out, right? I knew it was in theaters. I didn't see it in theaters actually. I would have to wait a few years before it came out. A little station called CC and TV6, right?
Okay.
I saw it there for the first time. And then when I got cable, I watched it over on BT, haha, right, of all stations, right? And it's over the years that I really grew to appreciate the film, right? But for me, honestly, the last time I watched this film was literally like some years ago, during film school, right? Because one of the courses I had where we explored certain directors, shout out to Dr. Chris Mayer. I mean,
Oh,
he knows
respect.
us, right? He knows the three of us, right? As in me,
Yes.
Ricardo, and CC, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, he had like a Spike Lee week, if you will.
Oh
So he
wow.
ran Malcolm X, and he also ran When the Levees Broke, right? Which was a really solid documentary, right? I
Wow.
need to recap it too. I haven't seen it in a long while, right? But yeah, that was literally the last time that I saw Malcolm X, right? That was years ago, right?
Wow.
But it still stood out to me over the years. It still stood out to me, right? And just looking at it again now, what really amazed me, right, is that when it comes to filmmakers, when it comes to Hollywood filmmakers, right, especially those who had to build their resume over the years, right? You would think something like Malcolm X, right? Which I believe is Spike Lee's sixth film, if I'm not mistaken, right? Let me just see, one, two.
I think it might
Yeah,
be.
it's his,
Yeah.
it's his sixth feature film,
Wow.
sixth filmer, and the first and only film that he will make with Warner Brothers because yeah, I mean I
Because he
mean you
made
could
it.
look it up online. I mean the film went over budget, and well,
Well,
actually more
okay.
notoriously during post production, yeah, they ran out of money, so Spike Lee literally had to call all of his friends like yo Bill Cosby, yo Magic, yo
Yeah.
Jordan, like literally called them
Right.
to
Well, I
yeah,
think
help
for
out, help
me,
our brother out, and yeah, they came through and
well,
financed the
it's well,
money for him to finish up the film.
I feel like for me, what's so bloody egregious is that like it's so easy to go over budget when you weren't given a budget in the first place. Like
Yep.
Malcolm X,
Thank
like
you, because well, sorry to cut you, because
yeah, go ahead.
one show that Spike Lee cited is that well they make a film the year before JFK, Oliver Stone ran for like 3 hours, right? So yeah, give me that amount of money, but they're like, well, we
No,
really
especially
don't know.
since
They just give
like
you a budget, so it's like, all right, well, we have to use it. We actually finished the film, cool, but we still need to work on post, bro. So where the money in that? And they were
they
like,
you
nope.
read I need to read his full book by any means necessary because I know that like the production was really difficult. The production was really like the studio. I mean, I was surprised. I was genuinely surprised that the film was like in development at all because like he mentioned that like he heard it was in development and I think was like what Sidney Lumet was originally supposed to direct
No,
and
Norman Jewison.
Norman Lear, yeah, the guy who
No,
did
Jewison.
yeah,
Who
Jewison. Sorry,
did, yeah.
Norman Jewison, the guy who did Fiddler on the Roof, was originally supposed to direct Malcolm X, and it was. And I know Spike Lee was like, "I want to do this," and Jewison was like, "Okay, yeah, actually, you would do much better with this than me." And then the studio decided that they weren't confident in it anymore, which is like I feel like that's mostly so like that's one of the reasons, one of those cases where it's a phenomenal movie in spite of its production. Honestly, given how this is a project that the studio wanted to kneecap from day one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there's a couple things couple before we get to Ricardo's history in the film, right? So a middle error here. This is actually the third Spike Lee joint I'm
What?
talking about
Okay.
here on the show. Because we talked about the Five Bloods, and it's so funny that
Oh
UCC was
Right,
with
right,
us,
right,
yeah.
right,
right?
right, right,
So
right.
yeah,
I've
I
been
mean
here for
things come
every
full circle,
single
right?
one.
Yeah, yeah, I mean
It's
when it
like
comes
it's
to
like
Spike Lee joints, you're always there, CC. I mean,
it's
exactly,
like
right?
a bat signal.
Yeah, but yeah, man. But yeah, back to the whole career thing, right? So you would think, see, a perfect example, Spielberg, right? He
Right.
started off in the mid 70s, right? And you would think, like look how long it took for him. It almost took him 2 decades to put out Schindler's List, right? Which is
Right.
his magnum opus, right? Which is his passion project. Something that is near and dear to his heart, right? But it took him
Mm.
close to 20 years for him to have enough clout to say, yeah, I'm just gonna make a 3 hour plus black and white epic film about the Holocaust, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm gonna do. And drop it in the same year as Jurassic Park, right? So look at that, right? But with
Right.
Spike Lee, he's like, no, this is my sixth joint. I'm gonna put this out. But I think the real reason behind it too is not just so much about Norman Jewison being signed on to make the film, right? But because of the socio-economic climate in America in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Especially
Right.
in the late 80s to early 90s, with more Afrocentric films and books and music, right? Especially with rap music, right? A lot of groups like say De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest. Their earlier work incorporated more Afrocentric stuff into it, right? So you would, yeah. So there was this kind of I don't know, this revival basically of
Right.
just African culture, right, in the United States now. But at the same time too, I mean, this is right after the Reagan era, and you just saw the
Yeah.
side effects of that in the in the
Right.
in the ghetto and in the urban communities, right? So and well, I should bring up too, also what happened with the late great oh gosh, I forget the names though, Rodney King, right?
Right.
Who he actually brings up in the beginning of this, and funny enough, right? I actually actually saw this in the behind the scenes while they were doing post production. Well, sorry, when they were showing a rough cut to the film, sorry, in Warner Brothers. The Rodney King riots had started, like the same day it started.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how real this shit was. That's how real
Ooh.
this was, right? Yeah. So you could understand why Warner Bros. Like, jeez, I don't know, I don't know if we should put this out, Yeah, because yeah, the political climate was just at a fever rate now. You know what I mean? So that's how important this film was,
Well,
right?
this is why I was saying that I was always surprised that they even were going for this film in the first place, because Malcolm X has always been an uncomfortable subject for the white establishment in America. So he's not a figure you can redeem or tone down like Martin Luther King. He's always been a lot more provocative. So the
Right.
idea that they ever had this film in development was shocking. And so much less so I was not surprised that in production they start going, maybe this isn't the time to put this out
Yeah,
there.
to put
Maybe
this
it's
out. Yeah.
a little too angry.
Exactly. But still, but just in closing, right? It's just amazing that just to get them a summary of it, right?
Yeah.
Not even 10 years into your career, Dred, into your trajectory
Wow.
as a filmmaker, and you drop what is easily your magnum opus. You just say, to hell with waiting 10, 15 years until I fully establish it. I'm gonna drop this right now. I'm gonna make this right now. I'm gonna put my energy into this, Dred. I have 5 films under my belt, right? and I'm gonna do this. And yeah, I mean the rest is history, right? So yeah, Ricardo, your history with the film.
Right. So yeah, this okay. So my actual history has been pretty strange. Where I remember going to the video store and wanted to get it, and it didn't have it in VHS. It had it only in Betamax, which we didn't have. But my friend had a Betamax, so we borrowed it anyway, and I borrowed his Betamax for the night. Well, my dad did that. We got that. That is pretty much it. That's how I saw this film for the first time.
Wow.
Spike Lee is one of those interesting figures because he's not old enough to be New Hollywood. But he wasn't young enough to be part of the new Renaissance. Right? I would argue that.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
he was of the 90s now. Like he was just this weird null point in between as a filmmaker and especially as a black filmmaker. And then the only other person at around his time that was like you could argue in that same space was probably like Robert Townsend, maybe.
Yeah.
Is one right.
Yeah.
He's one of those where it's like, okay, what we're gonna do in that sense of making this interesting new voice that a little on the angry end, let's admit that, but he makes it work and he was a necessary voice in that time. You know, I still really love School Days. I still really love stuff like what was Do the Right Thing, of course.
Yes.
And yeah, I thoroughly loved just what he did as a filmmaker. And then this I have no problem calling this his magnum opus. It is a really good movie. It comes together so well. Denzel Washington holds it. It plays the balance of the negativity of the conceit of what Malcolm X's early career was as opposed to what he was in his latter career. And then the big part that was, I would argue, one of the more controversial parts, the clash with him and the head of the Nation of Islam. I forget his name again.
Yes. Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah Muhammad, right? Yeah, and it was the sex scandal stuff, right? And all of that aspect of it that he wasn't having none of that at the time. This is back then. We knocking people now and it have a Me Too movement and outrage over that. Like, no, people are always outraged over that stuff. And the film just comes together so well in the conceit of it and what he was as a figure. And it's passionate, vulnerable, interesting. It of course it does the dolly slide thing, which is awesome, always awesome.
Of course, and it comes at just the right time.
Perfect
which I'll
time.
get into.
Yeah. Right. It comes together in terms of like who the guest stars were. I forget that Delroy Lindo was in this. I was like, oh yeah, right. Because I watched it a couple days ago. Though. Right. There's Delroy Lindo was in this. Well, we just talked about Black Panther. Angela Bassett, right? She was greeted as it was just a really, really, truly a great project, and for the product at its time is truly fantastic, and it have little to no problems I have with it. It's just a kind of a masterpiece, like just period.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so CC, take it away. Your history with Malcolm X, the film.
So, as I kind of mentioned in previous, I mean, it's interesting because I've been on every episode you guys have talked about Spike Lee, and actually, if attentive viewers will hear that my journey with Spike Lee has kind of, like, I've gone on a journey with Spike Lee, like, over the years, because I really started, So, talking about great timing, talk about great timing for a moment. I watched Malcolm X in the summer of 2020.
Nice. What was it before or after we talked about Do the Right Thing?
I think it was either a little before or just a little after, because what happened was my mother actually had loaned me her copy of the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, to read, and I had been kind of reading that while I was out in LA doing film related stuff, and then after that. COVID happened. I came back to Goshen, and then went back to where I was living at the time, and then finished the book, and then the film was on Netflix at the time, so I watched it on Netflix, and to this day, it is still my favorite Spike Lee movie. I haven't had because it is such an epic. It's difficult to casually rewatch. I haven't had the chance since then, but it's a film that, like, anytime Spike Lee is talking about it, I go check it out. There are certain sequences I love rewatching. I own the soundtrack on CD. I am an anachronist.
Nice.
I am an anachronistic soul.
Pat yourself on the back, man. Okay.
No, it's absolutely phenomenal. I I was reading another interview that Spike Lee was giving about the film. He was talking about how when one of the things about the budget that was a problem was he wanted to go and film, like he wanted to actually go to the Middle East to film the the pilgrimage,
the Mecca scene, the Mecca scene,
the Mecca scene. Yeah, he
pilgrimage,
actually filmed in Mecca, and the studio was like, "Are you sure we can't? There's this great lonely beach in New Jersey. Are you sure you can't
Yes.
film there?" And it was
That's
like,
true.
"Oh my god." Because he was like, because Lee made it clear, and you can see this in the film, but like he didn't just want to like adapt. He didn't just want to adapt the story of Malcolm X. He wanted to turn this into a true historic epic, and he directly compared it to the works of David Lean. So like Lawrence of Arabia, Passage to
that
India.
whole
and stuff
pilgrimage
like.
scene is a straight up tribute to Lawrence of Arabia.
Straight up, like the whole thing, and you feel that, like the way it's shot. It's so wild because as a Spike Lee film, it balances these epic ambitions and this huge sense of scope, but with this raw, intimate, personal quality, right? Like you really do get to understand Malcolm. I mean, first of all, that also Denzel Washington's performance. The fact he didn't win. I know he didn't win an Oscar for that because there is no justice in this world. There is no justice and sense of righteousness in this world because Denzel Washington.
Well, as you bring up that, right?
Yeah.
Fun fact, right? So when every time you think about Malcolm X, you think that this show is nominated for a ton of Oscars, right? You only got nominated for 2: Best Actor and Best Costume Designer. That's the only 2. Now, I love Unforgiven, right? I love it, right? And that in itself, deconstruct the Western and also touch out on race too as well, right? Great film, right? But admittedly, let's be real, man. Malcolm X should have won over that movie.
Oh yeah, no,
don't disrespect Clint Eastwood, right?
I appreciate Unforgiven a lot, but there is no movie that came out the same year as Malcolm X that should have won the Oscar for Best Picture, especially since like the Academy normally loves historical epics and like performances as people as like important like leading historic figures and that kind of thing. Like there is no reason this shouldn't have won the Oscar for Best Picture. Like, oh my god. Especially since like Denzel Washington really does establish himself as like something of like a dramatic powerhouse in that movie with Spike Lee's direction. But it also has a sense of humor. I was surprised. Like finally watching the movie after reading the book, I was surprised at its sense of humor. Like the scene where they get sentenced and the guy passes out because he doesn't understand what consecutive.
Thought he was getting sentenced for a whole century actually.
Like there's these little moments of humor. It's wild to see. So it is a historical epic, but it's a historic epic Spike Lee's way. So there's still humor. The soundtrack is delightful because it's like very contemporary music with like older music and like Terrence Blanchard is the score again. And
yes.
Someday I will geek out about Terrence Blanchard, and then we can go for several hours. But
I want to be there for it, though. I love this.
Oh my god, he's fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, no, like one of my like favorite movies of all time. When I was working on my thesis project, when I was working on my thesis project to graduate with my master's degree, I was working on a historic film, and Malcolm X was one of the big inspirations because I was working on a similar project of like a screenplay for like a historic biographical film, but like one that wasn't like a more cliche example. And not only in the writing of it, but in my artist statement, I brought up Malcolm X as an example of like how to do a historical epic that's not only still personal, but also doesn't conform to a traditional linear structure as well, right? So like, I have nothing but love for Malcolm X. Nothing but love for Malcolm X.
All right, so I got some notes. So just a lot of stuff to cover, right? Because I mean, this is like a 301 20-minute film, right? So I'm not gonna go detail by shot for shot or whatever with what happened, right? But I'm just gonna just more or less mention the notes that I wrote down, right? So I always love the intro for this film, Dre, where you see this American flag, and it's very reminiscent of actually a really brilliant biopic by the name of Patton, right? A Best Picture winner, right, from 1970, right? everything about this opening sequence is gripping. Terrence Blanchard's score for this is so poignant and it works, so it gives you chills. And then you're hearing Denzel, speaking as Malcolm X, right? And he actually starts the film off by saying, it's a famous speech, I charge a white man with being the greatest murderer on earth. I charge a white man with being the greatest kidnapper on earth, and so on, right? And I love how Spike Lee adds footage from the Rodney King arrest back in '91, right? And this is something I always love about Spike, where like even with a period piece like this, he would somehow make it kind of contemporary at the time, but not act as if, oh well, 10 years from now people aren't gonna care. It's like, no, this was a big deal, right? So case in point, we do the right thing where during the pre-riot, there's this moment where the rioters were saying Howard Beach, right? And that's related to something that took place, I believe, it's 2 years before Do the Right Thing even came out, right? Um, so even in a period piece like Malcolm X, right, he's going to remind you how serious racism is, how serious violence towards black people was, right, and will always be in America, right? I just love how he keep cutting back from the American flag to the Rodney King footage, right? And why did the scene credits and whatnot? Ruth Carter, what I mean, as a was nominated for best costume design, right? And she was actually the first African American to win in that category, thanks to the first Black Panther movie, right? Look at that, right? And this sequence, I should say, ends on such a chilling moment where the American flag burns now and leaves behind this X-shaped cutout, right? For me, that is how you open a movie. That is how you open a movie, Dread. Ricardo, any thoughts on this
Oh
opening?
no, yeah. No, solid business. All things nothing really to talk about there. It's like, yeah, there's a like, yep, we know what the movie's called. Okay, like, thank you. No, yeah, this is a real good opening sequence. It's brilliant. It's really well done. I can't be mad at it. Yeah, this is like, yeah, they make it work for it.
Yeah, CC, any thoughts on this opening sequence?
I, I, one of the things I love about Spike Lee stylistically, one of my professors, published author, Todd Berliner, said in one of my classes in grad school was Spike Lee will. It doesn't matter if the movie ends up being good. His goal will always be to make it interesting, right?
Right.
And I feel like one of the things I really appreciate about Malcolm X in particular is that, and actually all of his historical films, historical films are often accused of like trying to be apolitical by like, oh, this is what happened in the past. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Like,
Right.
it's not connected to now because it happened so long ago when we were backward. Lee has never made a historic film that doesn't viciously remind you of the ways in which, because he's always interested in subjects that still have contemporary relevance, and so he's always will remind you of that. I feel like even if like if Spike Lee made a movie about ancient Greece, it would still have like footage of like it would still incorporate footage of like a contemporary issue or a riot or like something like that. Like, and like his opening credit sequences are always so stark and interesting. Like they're always like, I always think about the the bit from Black Klansman where it's like the footage from Gone with the Wind, and then like the KKK, then like Alec Baldwin is like the leader of the KKK filming that video. Like they're dynamic, they're brilliantly edited. The imagery is intentionally like aggressively like provocative and like intense. And of course Blanchard's music just like ties it all together. Like it works in so many different ways. Like, yes, this is a historic film that owes a lot to like the formal prestige of historical films, but it's still got Spike Lee's confrontational style to it. And yeah, the little homage to Patton is also brilliant, given that Patton is another biographical film that actually does a pretty good job of like not being not being an uninteresting film or whatever. Like, it does a pretty good job of like presenting a kind of abrasive subject in an abrasive style as well. Like, it works really well.
Yeah, agreed. So Spike Lee's in this movie, right? He plays Shorty, right? And honestly, I don't even blame him to be in this, right? Because this is your passion project, Jed. I mean,
Oh yeah.
why not, right? Like, why not, right? I mean, he was in She's Gonna Have It, More Better Blues, do the writing and Jungle Fever, right? So why not, right? But I just love the opening sequence, right? Which, well, the first sequence that we see, and I didn't even know till like after the fact that this was actually a long take here, right? A crane shot and whatnot, right? But I just love, just in particular, when he's crossing the street after he gets his shoe shine, and he just has this player like bop, he just kind of moving like something about that always stands out to me. And then even better now, when Denzel comes out now, he's walking back
Them
across the street,
suits,
and he
eh?
do that same bop too. I love that.
Those goddamn zoot suits.
Yes.
Oh, this is moments like that you remember why Ruth Carter won for was nominated for costume design, and why she's such a good costume designer, because like her style is so adaptable. Like she's able to pull off she's able to pull off all the different design. Like yeah, she pulls off like the zoot suits, and then she like later pulls off like the robes for during the pilgrimage, and then also like the more casual wear and everything. Like her work is so good. Like those suits, like especially the way they're described in the book, like they pop so much on screen.
Agreed, agreed. I always find it so ironic that Malcolm, the character of Malcolm, is introduced in a barbershop, right? Cause yeah, pretty much it sets up, him, always straightening his hair, right?
Yep.
So there's this great bit
Yep.
involving Shorty now, who's like making this mixture. He puts red devil lye, some white hair cream, some potatoes. I think it's potatoes. He's cutting up a raw egg and water, and then they mix it up and put it in his hair to straighten his hair, right? I just love there's a shot where after the concoction literally burns his head, right? He looks in the mirror, he smiles and said, "Looks white, don't it?" I love that. I love that, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
even like and also attention to detail, right? I love that. Even Spike and all was Spike Lee director actually incorporate the fact that Malcolm had this kind of slightly reddish brown hair. I like that.
Yeah.
Like, because it was mentioned in the book. I believe he got it from his
Yeah.
mother, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
It's very important in the book. Yeah.
Right. And speaking of mom now, we actually get a powerful montage detailing Malcolm's parents, right? And
Damn.
it took about a hot minute to realize that the mother actually is played by Lynette McKee, who actually played Wesley Snipes' wife in Jungle Fever, right? She was
Right,
the
right.
like right. That was her, right?
Oh.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And remember that film was all about, oh well, this black man suddenly cheated behind his wife with this Italian American woman, right? And you
Right.
see all these shenanigans that take place, right? But I just love how this montage more or less sums up, like basically what the first chapter of the autobiography is, whereas like you saw while he was born, the struggles that he and his family endured. But I wouldn't lie though, even though I haven't read the entirety of the book though, and I know that Denzel's voiceover narration is literally word for word lifted from that novel. I know that, right, for sure. Speaking of school days, as you mentioned, Ricardo, Spike Lee even incorporates some of his musical film knowledge into this as well, right?
Right.
With the jazz club dance sequence, right? That sequence is just so enthusiastic, though, just so vibrant, I should say, right? I just love it, right? Because it's swing music and all that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
just the coordination, the choreography with just a bunch of extras dancing, right? And speaking of jazz club, though, I just love the fact that Malcolm, right, is legit dancing with Teresa Randall, Dread. I didn't watch it
Right,
like,
right,
shit,
right,
it's
right, right.
Teresa Randall.
Yeah, I forget
Wow.
she was. Yeah.
And then yet a white woman steps in, and I know Ricardo, you know who this
Another
person
90s
is.
body.
Yes, Kate Vernon, right? From Battlestar Galactica, right?
Right.
And she's
Oh
the
wow.
only white woman in this club, eh? And Malcolm just fall head over heels, and yeah, they just start this relationship, right? But there's an excellent, excellent, excellent piece of blocking, right, where the camera follows Malcolm and the white woman, Sophia, that's her name, right, in a dolly
I
shot,
think
right,
so.
and they head over to the dance floor, and like a short distance away, you're seeing Teresa's character following them, right, staying specifically at Malcolm, and you could tell that she just in disbelief now. They use
Yeah.
some depth of field, but you could see her moving within the crowd and then stopping at a particular point. Like, this is brilliant, and I love this. I
I
love
Yeah.
this, right? I love
know.
this. Yeah. There's a smart bit of writing that follows afterwards, right? There's this light-hearted scene where Shorty and Red are playing cops and robbers. They play shooting at each other at this park, right? But the dark irony about the scene is that it foreshadows Malcolm's assassination, right? But not at the hands of a white man, but from a black man, right? The final fake shot that Shorty gives him is punctuated by this, like, we actually hear a gunshot, like a real gunshot sound effect, right?
Hmm.
And even more effective is how it cuts immediately to Malcolm's father at this where this way at this train track, I believe it is, where he got killed now, where he was murdered basically when Malcolm was a kid, right?
Yeah.
Um Spike even incorporates a little repeat shot moment, similar to like what he did in Do the Right Thing, where Mookie and Rosie Perez's character meet at a place and then they kiss. But I think it's the same shot shown twice, or is probably two takes or something like that. I'm not too sure, right?
Hmm.
And this is where Malcolm was working at the train, this train, because he didn't want to get drafted into the war, right? And he sees this white sailor, the white sailor and shit, right? I was like, oh yeah, here's your ham and cheese, and like he imagines himself smacking the sailor now with the sandwich over his face. I see it twice, like pop pop. But then it just cuts back to reality. It's like, here, sir, here's your sandwich, sir. I know, just that moment, though, I actually love that. It's Spike Lee just incorporated some of his isms, if you will, into this film. I really love that, right? So speaking of Delroy Lindo, yes, he is in this film. He plays West Indian Archie, right? Who
Hmm?
Malcolm has this chance encounter with in Harlem, right? And eventually joins his numbers racket, right? There's a great moment where Malcolm is at church, right? And I love how it mirrors his own father, who is a preacher, right? But he's there on business, right? So the guy behind him says 323 immediately after the pastor says John 3 verse 23. I was like, word, I love it, right? Malcolm is introduced to white powder. Yeah, he get a little taste of the cocaine after a while, right? Thanks to Archie, right? And when Malcolm gets off on his first lift, he does the whole cups and rubbers thing again, right? But with Archie, right? But the game ends now where Archie fires his final shot. And you hear that gunshot sound effect again, right? There's a moment where Malcolm kind of stares at him for a few seconds with this like glazed, almost lifeless look in his eyes now. So foreshadowing once again, right? I love that, right? I will confess early on in the first act of the film, the nonlinear narrative is something the other adjust to, right? So where you will see Malcolm's life and whatnot, but then it will just kind of cut back to the past involving him and his family, right? So there's a moment where right after he escapes Archie's and his two henchmen, right? Because yeah, of course, Malcolm kind of do some shit, and Archie want to kill him, right? We see one of the film's most memorable moments now, where Malcolm's dad now in flashback chases away a group of Klansmen after they burn his home, right? And fun fact, Malcolm was actually the baby in that scene because when the
Right.
scene begins now, you just see this crib,
The
right?
red
And
hair.
it's one
Yeah.
of those blinking and missing moments, but yeah, that is Malcolm. So in the book, he says he didn't. He was a baby when it happened, but he found out after the fact, right? There's a dark but pretty hilarious callback to the hair straightener scene later on now, where all right, so I have to talk about the house robbery scene, right? So eventually, because of the shit with Archie now, Malcolm goes back to Boston, right? And he hooks up with Shorty again, right? And Shorty has a white woman, which is funny too, right? So they just decide, all right, we just going to rob houses now, right? We're gonna rob rich white folk, right? And there's a moment where see Malcolm and Shorty Malcolm specifically trying to pull this watch out of this guy's hand. No, sorry, not a watch, sorry, a ring out this guy's finger, right? Literally while he's sleeping, right? And the wife is sleeping right next to him. And you just there thinking, nah, he's not gonna get that ring. And he actually gets the ring and like leaves and like, wow, oh shit, okay. That was real funny to me, right? But anyway, day afterwards now, Shorty is straightening Malcolm's hair, but the moment it starts to burn, they realize there's no water, and the only place that has water, unfortunately, is the toilet bowl. And I
Hmm.
love that, Malcolm is like dousing his hair with the toilet bowl water, and then the cops show up right in the doorway, and Shorty's already happy, and they say, the jig is up, right? So I love that moment, right? So now to get to that moment that you say your phone was pretty hilarious, CC, where yeah they in court now. The Sophie and the other girl, they get 2 years in this woman's reformatory, right? But Shorty and Malcolm they actually get a minimum of 10 years, right? But because the judge pretty much just calling all these counts, I believe it's 14 counts of 8 to 10 years that he gives the yeah, Shorty actually think is over a whole century they had to be in jail and he feeds. I love that. That was pretty funny, right? But yeah, pretty much Shorty and Malcolm they have to serve 10 years hard labor or less at the Charlestown State Prison, right? So again, with great writing now, there's a sequence involving Malcolm being told to state his number while he's in prison, right? And he refuses and he's thrown in solitary, right? And periodically they always open up the little slate and they ask him, all right, what's your number? And he kind of just refuses and they leave him in, right? But I don't know, I could be wrong with this, but I saw it as sort of foreshadowing too, with Malcolm's conversion to Islam, right? Where he kind
Yeah.
of has to reject that white surname of Little, right? And use X instead. So it's like, yeah, you
Yeah,
gave me this
exactly.
number, white prison guard or whatever,
Hmm.
but that is not that's not my name, so I'm not gonna tell you because it's not my name. You know what I mean? So he keeps rejecting
Right.
that. I love that. I love this is those little bits of detail in this film that I love. Right?
Well, like one of the things I really love about that whole string of events, but specifically the trying to get his hair straightened, but then the only water is in the toilet, and then that's when they get arrested. It's kind of this brilliant formative moment, kind of like it's this brilliant, like it's this moment, like it's one of those moments that like if you were a writer you would do that, but like it's weird that it like happened in real life because yeah, in the book in particular, Malcolm X makes it clear that this was the moment where he was like kind of realized that his life up until this point had been pretty useless. Like up and like he kind of like what am I like kind of the what am I doing
Yeah.
moment
Hmm.
because like he's there going to all this, especially the hair straightening. Like he talked about how like he went to all this trouble and all this like personal because like it literally burns like all this effort to like straighten his hair and like trying to like, oh look at me, and then like realize that like what am I doing, this is like why am I so ashamed of my, and it goes back
This
to
this
like
is
being
beneath me. This is
this is
beneath me.
beneath me, why am I so ashamed of my blackness that I want white hair, and that like I will even literally burn my scalp and destroy my hair to get white hair, like why am I doing this, especially when like he then has to and then like has to rinse it off in the toilet because like there's nothing else he could possibly do.
Yeah, yeah. It's a low point, but I love how the show plays it for laughs as well too, right? So let's talk about Albert Hall for a bit, man. He plays Beans. He's the guy who pretty much the convict, sorry, who eventually converts Malcolm to Islam, right? The moment he confronts Malcolm and calls him out on the fact that he's going out of his way to look white, right? Only for the white man to laugh at him, right? And he's pointing out the hair straightener, right? Is so intense and it's powerful at the same time. It's actually kind of transcendent at the same time, right? But just I mean, yeah, he is one of the best performers in this film, right? But just that particular moment where he's talking down to Malcolm while he's at the shower, right? Is brilliant, dude. Like I just love that moment. It's just especially the intensity of that scene in particular, right? Of course, Malcolm thinks that Beans is a con man, right? But then he realizes no, it's actually not a con, right? He more or less tried to recondition his mind, right? After the false messages that the white man pretty much had black people believe from the beginning, right? And then we get like one of the most memorable moments in the film, right, where Beans goes where they go to the library and they look up the word black in the dictionary, right, and they see the void of color,
Yeah.
enveloped in darkness, sullen, hostile, outrageously wicked, right? But when you look up white, they say the opposite of black, innocent, pure, without evil intent, right? And in true Spike Lee fashion, we get a full shot of the dictionary itself. Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, right? And you just see this portrait of this white man, Webster at the side of that. I love that, right? And it goes as far as, being seen, read the dictionary for the beginning, right? So you look at aardvark and abacus and so on and so forth, right? Um, but the greatness between the two of them continue, right? There's a moment where like some black inmates, they praise the success of Jackie Robinson, right? And Baines is like, cool, white man throws us a bone and we're supposed to forget 400 years of oppression, right? And here I want to hear your thoughts on this, guys, right? So this is where we get the true greatness of this film, right? So like do the right thing. Spike is not forcing the viewer to side with a particular person or viewpoint, right? Yes, being said that Muhammad says the true nature of the original man, the black man, is righteousness, which means that the true nature of the white man is wickedness, right? And Elijah Muhammad teaches us that all white men are devils, right? Yes, that is what Muhammad was preaching, right? But the film is not telling you to believe that, right? But yet you can understand the why behind it, right? And that's why they give you, this set up the world, right? And especially the pressures that African Americans went through, right? Specifically African Americans, right? But also it's not telling you it's a good viewpoint or a bad viewpoint. It's a viewpoint, right? And you understand the why behind it, right? So look, case in point, do the right thing, right? With the use of the Malcolm X and the MLK quotes at the end, right? They neither right nor wrong, right? But you could understand the why behind the quotes, right? You could tell that Spike was leaning more towards the Malcolm X quote, where it's like, you know what I mean? It's not about turning your right cheek. You had to sort of fight back, but not in a violent way. But you don't just take shit. You had to fight back in a way, right?
Right.
And in the end of the day, I mean, Malcolm X is not like a black exclusive film. It's a universal film, right? Regardless of race or gender or religious belief, right? You can watch the film and get its message, right? but at the same time, it's not telling you that Islam is the way and whatnot. I mean, if you saw this film and decide to convert to Islam, cool,
Yeah,
great for you,
I
right?
don't think that was the
But
yeah,
sure,
I
it's
don't think
not
that was the
telling you
argument.
to do
I
that,
mean,
right?
if that was the case, then Spike Lee should be a Muslim, right?
You know,
Um,
exactly, which is it. That last thing I'll say though, and this is why you have to praise Lee for taking such special care with this subject matter and just adding, sorry, a lot of nuance to the film, right? So again, characters will say and act in a certain way, but it's not telling the viewer this is the way because black man, white man, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That's what I try to say. But yeah, Ricardo, your thoughts on the nuance of the film?
yeah, Spike Lee clearly takes a side on certain issues and matters. That's not like the question per se, but yeah, he does put things in a workable context. At least you could respect the argument. No, it's not complete silliness or for lack of a better term, straw man in one side or the other or anything like that. And he does a good job with that for the most part. In this case, look, the relationship between black people and Islam. In its own workable history, yeah, there's a lot of anti-blackness amongst the Muslim world. That's not a secret or anything like that. But in the context of the United States, yeah, the Nation of Islam and its particular, let's say for lack of a better term, mutation, um, it was a workable conceit for a lot of black people, period. Like it's not even a question or a debate or anything like that. It's like, yeah, sorry, Christianity was the tool of the oppressor. Islam framed itself as the opposite, and that's where the use came in. Like again, people's getting debates about the origins of things and all kind of weird, well, for lack of a better term, genetic fallacies of these kind of things. And like, no, it's what people use it for. That's what it is. It's not the history of it. Forget the supposed origins or whatever it is what it is being used for now. And that's how he frames, I think, Islam in this context. And it works for well the character and the time. Him just using Islam as a pivot point to be skeptical of the wait, it was a Catholic priest. I can't remember what kind of priest it was.
Oh yes, the prison chaplain, who was actually played by Christopher Plummer though. Like I was like,
Right.
you in this too? What?
Yeah,
Oh, and also points for this is a little blink of the missing moment, right? Where yeah, be Malcolm X rocking glasses now. So there's a moment where he's asking the chaplain now. So what color were the disciples? You know, be like what
right.
color were the original Hebrews, right? Because you say, well, Jesus is white and blah blah blah, right? But points for having Plummer's glasses be slightly crooked while Malcolm's own is straight. Like it's just
Yeah,
those little bits of detail that I
yeah.
absolutely love about the film.
And
Yeah,
and, and that's the main thing about this because here's the one thing about like the dumb things with religion. Like okay, if people fight on the skin color of Jesus or whatever it is, where the person who acting as if this where the insidiousness of a lot of, well, lack of a better term, white supremacy operates is that they act as if they're dispassionate and detached from the thing. But once you actually start challenging the thing and say, okay, well, let's change it, then all of a sudden they'll make a big stink about it. And they care about reality, but they keep claiming of facts over feelings. But the only reason that they operate in the way they are is because of their feelings. I mean, it's that, right? That's dependent on aesthetics and catering to history, so supposed historical arguments. It doesn't work out in their favor anyway. So why even propose it as some kind of neutral point? Because they're still catering to the aesthetics and being dishonest about that, right? That's how I always interpret a lot of these big arguments about say people like Malcolm X or whoever it is.
Right.
Stop messing up the vibe. Rather than some supposed real conceit of the facts of the world now. Because if you were to really push the facts of the world, you should end capitalism or whatever it is, right? All of these things you
Right.
could get these arguments about, and that's what I like about Spike. He pushes the argument, but not silly. It's not
I think
ridiculous. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I
On.
think
Yeah.
I think one of the things about Spike Lee that's so brilliant is that Spike Lee would probably have a lot more success as a filmmaker if he was more willing to be less even if he was more willing to be more direct and pick a particular side rather than the thing he does where he'll present multiple sides or he'll deliberately pick characters that maybe he disagrees with, things like that. Spike Lee is simultaneously very direct and very indirect very indirect at the same time, right? How he keeps he apparently talks about how white people keep coming up to him and asking whether, hey, did Mookie do the right thing? And he just doesn't
Yeah, exactly.
give them that answer. One of the things I
Yes,
really
yes.
like about this movie is that no, it isn't a recruitment of the Nation of Islam. Part of which is that later in the film, because this is subjective, and Lee does a great job of making this film subjective to the perspective of of the perspective of Malcolm X. You know, like he does a great job of like showing you where he was at this time. I mean, the voiceover helps as well, but like he like puts you where he was at this time, all the stuff he was going through, and like he makes sense. But then like everything makes sense. Like you understand why he converts, and then later in the film when he develops his new, and obviously we'll get to that later, but like when he develops his new appreciation for Islam and his new understanding of it, that makes sense too. Like that whole perspective makes sense, and he sees the world in this very different way, and that is also like really interesting and really powerful. And like the film does a great job of like I don't know how, because I know the Nation of Islam isn't like Scientology levels of like lawsuits and stuff, but like I know the Nation of Islam did like a little, because I know they did this when the book came out as well. They like did a little bit of complaining. I was like, we are not that bad. Like, I don't know if they still like as an institution defend Elijah Muhammad, but
well, two things. As the thing with it is that, again, as it effectively is a kind of syncretic kind of conceit of religions in a sense, right? That's what it originally meant itself to be, because it is just, in America in particular, is that, oh, well, we're going to make a black of this, on a very explicitly black version of this. So what it becomes is like, nothing as we understand it, if you understand Islam in some kind of international sense. But you could still, you still have to technically call them Muslims. The quick rule of thumb I call them is like comparing Mormonism to Christianity. It's kind of like that. That's like the quick rule of thumb in my head. I mean, somebody could probably correct me on that, right?
Like the Nation of Islam is very different from like the original Islamic faith, and like that's one of the most powerful parts of the movie for me is Malcolm X coming to learn that through his own pilgrimage and coming to understand, but also like how this does lead to his downfall, how this puts him at odds with the Nation of Islam, and how this is kind of one of his big undoings is like. Realizing
it's a very strange phenomenon, like in terms of the Americanization of things now.
The Americanization of other religions. Like, look what America does in the 60s and 70s to Buddhism. When the hippies get
I was about to get to that. I was thinking karate dojos. Like, yes, it's that. It's this weird mutation and marketing that just caters to itself in its own strange way, and then we'll getting into the misbehavior of Elijah Muhammad, and I put in that very charitably, and his whole deal, and then the militancy and the nature of it, and it is understandable why a lot of people will fall into that, because you're against the college, you're against the government as it is, because again this is the 60s and things was. A lot of anti-communist stuff you could get into, and it's a big mix up.
Well, the 50s at this point, right? But we will lead up to the 60s, of course,
Right. Well, I was saying 50s to 60s, I should say, because really getting into the anti-communism part of it now. That whole, how people are thinking about the foreign threats of the world and what could be framed as what and why, and you could get into a whole, conceit of which groups was what and how, and the Black Panthers was one of the more toxic manifestations of it. And the sad part is that this is, and you see this up until Louis Farrakhan, right? And I would argue Dave Chappelle to an extent to this day of catering to more, you're using a valid argument to push up, for lack of a better term, a pretty insidious argument for the most part, right? Louis Farrakhan have so many good moments in his life and career, like in terms of what he should think about the world and how he sees things, and when it comes to race, absolutely like total shutdown. Like, holy shit, Louis Farrakhan nailed this, well, if you use it in the modern context, wrecked, or whatever it is, right. But, ultimately, what his worldview is in my opinion, incredibly toxic nonsense. But, because he leverages real pathology and something that should be leveraged into something that becomes, toxic nonsense, that's the unfortunate nature of that. That's your whole bag. As long as America remains the way it is, you're going to get these type of people existing, right?
Yes.
That's a straight commentary on the system, right? And Spike Lee does a really good job of addressing that and showing that. It's like, you totally understand why these guys existed, right? You have the good side of this for the most part. The Black Panthers, we could argue about their legacy. But then you have the Nation of Islam and what people use as a safe space. Right.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, is a safe space. That's what it was. So I just made my 2 points on just the why the Nation of Islam is the way it is and how and why it's well framed in this movie, like brilliantly framed.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, because it gets to the fact that like what drew Malcolm to this religion in the first place is
Right.
the same thing that led him to leave.
Right.
Because he was never just in it for. It reminds me of like it's interesting to see the kind of people that get drawn into like these whack religions or cults or whatever, because they often have like a deeply personal reason why they get involved in them.
Right.
And then the way they leave is it becomes clear that is not the reality. That is not the reality. Like they become. That's one of the reasons why the film is so spiritual to me in a lot of ways. Because yes, he gets involved in the Nation of Islam, thinking that it is black empowerment and brotherhood, and then he comes to realize that the brotherhood part is missing. Like there's this black power part of it, but it's this very toxic version of that. Like I don't like the one thing the film doesn't incorporate is that the book does is that the book goes into the whole like the weird new creation story that the Nation of Islam create about how like white people are literally the devil, and it's so.
And the Nation of Islam is like a nice version of somebody the more like it stuff just get way worse. Like if you know what the Nubians or Nuwapians are. And stuff like that, right? It have a lot, like it just get weird. Like it have a whole rabbit hole of black supremacist stuff. Or anyone knows who Yakum is, right? If you get into that, like the animated series Black Dynamite addresses it.
Yes, you're right. I remember that.
Yeah, is that kind of stuff? Like just the tip of the iceberg in this kind of nonsense. But again, you know, when people, you know, again, when you have people under stress, the kind of nonsense they'll believe now, unfortunately. And well, I have a whole hypothesis and thesis on something involving Bitcoin, which I'll talk about with that, because it's kind of the same thing. It's not something that just ideology manifests. It is money, you know, just systems, you know, trust in institutions, lack of trust in institutions, lack of trust in the world at large, and you know where people just go with this kind of stuff now. Like it's not a natural like it's not a big surprise that a lot of like cults came out of the 70s from the 60s, because the 60s happened. Like
well,
also
that I feel like it's almost more surprising that more cults don't target marginalized groups, because
exactly
a big thing that gets, and I think your comparison to Bitcoin is a good one, because often what gets offered or suggested and promised is empowerment and social capital. Right. Like, if you look at the origins of Scientology, and Matthew, I am sorry to talk about Scientology and bring your podcast under risk of being sued out of existence, but
be easy.
But like, one of the things about Scientology in particular that's so wild is that you look at the origins and how it's like a group of personalities who are all coming together, and it's like, yes, we will empower you through science and rationality, and then space gods get involved. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. But yeah, like often that's what happens. Like every cult, every whack religion is a bill of goods.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Yeah, unfortunately. So let's talk about Angela Bassett for a bit, man. You know,
AKA
Betty Saunders, who will eventually become Betty Shabazz, right? I just love you know when she steps into the scene though. And pretty much her character she set up here is that she teaches Muslim women about proper hygiene and diet, right? And she has a nice little pickup line. There's one of those blinking and missing moments where she says, "Do you know what Harriet Tubman did between taking souls to the promised land? She eat." I was like, boy, all right, I see you. The convo scene between Malcolm and Betty and Elijah, I'll get to do that in a bit. By the way, played brilliantly by Al Freeman Jr. My God, like
for real.
Right? It's so goddamn brilliant, right? And here we see how tight Malcolm latches on to Elijah's teachings, right? So he just more or less repeated word for word every, well, admittedly non-politically correct view that Elijah have, pretty much seen about women, and I just don't like the way how they're dressing with these short skirts and these makeup and da. And Malcolm is just repeating this word for word, right?
Right.
But I love that true true Betty's responses, because really all she just wanted to do is just to know Malcolm. She don't want to hear about Elijah. She just want to know who Malcolm is, right? But you get the sense that eventually and obviously Malcolm has to start thinking for himself, right? Instead of just repeating everything that he says, right? But there's a scene that follows now where he finally opens up and he has this calm, relaxing conversation with Betty, right? And that scene compared to what we saw before is genuinely beautiful though. And also lastly I'll say
Hmm.
points for the little to no makeup that Angela has throughout this film, again,
Oh yeah.
showing, again, the beliefs and whatnot, right? I love that, right? But yeah, go on.
Well, I was thinking about how one of the things about Malcolm and his relationship is that it doesn't take very long for Elijah Muhammad to like recognize that he's a very powerful orator and like a really charismatic speaker, and like that kind of and, like that becomes like a huge plot point, obviously, because like because it means that like anyone like I feel like leaders need to be charismatic in and of themselves, but anytime they figure out that one of their disciples is also decently charismatic, that's like a huge amount of work they don't have to do. So like that kind of becomes what Malcolm can contribute to the organization. I feel like that's so important. But one of the things I really do appreciate talking going back to the romance is yes, um like I know like discourse on the way Spike Lee writes women has gone back and forth over the years, but I definitely think one of his best female characters is Angela Bassett's character in this movie,
Right.
because she and Malcolm have this genuine connection, like this genuine, beautiful, like they get on. You get them as a couple, like their romance like absolutely makes sense, right? And you get it's one of the parts of the movie that's a lot more personal, and I really appreciate that touch because it like helps to contextualize that Malcolm is a person, not just like a historical figure and
Yeah.
that events happen to, kind of. But yeah, no, the
What
romance.
one thing,
Go ahead.
one thing, yeah, there's a great little side point. Because one of the things I always found very insidious about, not so much about, well, I don't know if it's America in particular, but I noticed it with United States because of how, well, for lack of a better term, how generally non-religious the country is. But
Yes.
what I always found strangely distrustful and unusual about the states is just this penchant for hagiography, right? There's this, you need to make this person bigger than they really is, and this absolute like
Yes.
allergy to like real history in a real sense and a real context. And it's
Yes.
weird to watch that play out for a country that is supposedly explicitly secular, right? Or non-religious, right?
Yes.
Even the guys who push the whole secular non-religion thing themselves are, lionized and put on a pedestal in the most ridiculous ways. Even the guys who lose the goddamn Civil War have fucking statues to this day, right?
Yeah. No. It is.
That's
It's.
nonsense.
Well, there's this need. I think it's, and I'm not gonna say. I know, like I run in religious circles. There's this argument made that it's the absence of religion. It causes people to go looking for something to replace it. I
Okay,
don't know if I quite buy that logic, but at the
right.
same time, there is something that goes on where you do have people like hell. I feel like you even see this in a contemporary sense in stan culture, right?
Right, right,
Where you
right,
have
right.
where
Exactly.
you
Or
no
that,
you, you
let's call it social parasociality.
yeah, well,
Right,
because
right.
and like one of the things I find so interesting is you see all these YouTubers who deal with parasocial relationships, and they're always like, I don't know what to do. Like the level to which these people, like it's not just like they casually like and respect me. It's there's a level of obsession. There's a
Yeah,
level of I can do no wrong, and I know the minute I do wrong, my my whole dynamic is like ruined. Like
right.
my whole life. And it does go back. Like someone like even before America had mass communication, really, there was traveling charismatic religious leaders and traveling like these cults and early religions spread and all, but even when it wasn't like cults and religions, they were still like um not well, Del Toro kind of makes a good point in Nightmare Alley where he kind of talks about how a lot of like so-called rational spiritual stuff was just kind of like a rebranding of certain like
Right.
religious culty phenomena, right? Like it does feel like trying to invent religion without religion, and then you
Yeah,
wonder why is there this need for it in the first place.
yeah,
And Elijah Muhammad definitely goes through this thing where like yeah, they do have to make him into this larger than life
yeah.
like they have to make him into this like larger than life like religious leader, right? Like he
Yeah.
reminds me of like if you've seen Keep Sweet Pray and Obey on Netflix here, like the one about the even wackier Mormons. He reminds me of the leader in that. I can't remember his name, but he was the guy who got arrested also for sex crimes, who is still leading the religion from prison, which just tells you how like obsessively he is
Yeah.
um like loved and like adored by like his loyal followers. And it is a very, it's not uniquely American because John of God is like South American, but these figures, there's something about this country that attracts them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I
It's
love how this show in particular builds tension within the Nation of Islam, right? You
Yeah.
really get to
yes,
see the deep insidiousness going on, right? So, case in point, there's a moment where Beans, of all people, you know what I mean, going and telling Elijah, oh, you know, the ministers think Malcolm's getting too much press. They think they
yes,
think he thinks he's the Nation of Islam, that he has aspirations to lead the nation, right? And you know, the tension just builds even more where Betty of all people, right, addresses matter involving Elijah facing paternity suits from two women in their
Mm.
20s, right? So
Yep.
wow,
he, a 67-year-old man, right, is the father of their children, right? Well, in actuality, he was the father of 8 children, thanks to 6 teenage women, as they described. I'm going
Oof.
off of the
Yeah. Yeah.
Malcolm X 1972 documentary, which, by the way, is
Right.
actually a bonus feature in the upcoming release of Malcolm X. But I actually saw it, you know,
Okay,
after the fact. But yeah, they actually brought up the fact that yeah, he fathered 8 children, right? And
wow,
even worse now, Beans and some of his brothers practically living off of Malcolm's, you know, sermons, right? You know, for the nation, right? While Malcolm, Betty, and the family, I think at the time, they only had 2 daughters, right? They practically in a financial red. They're not like driving fancy cars and thing compared to Bean and the others, right? So it's clear that Malcolm's work is being disregarded by the nation, right? Um, to the point that yeah, at a point in time they might just pretty much get rid of him, right? There's a great moment where Malcolm visits the 2 women, right, and they confess. They say that yeah, Elijah did what he did, right? And then afterwards he talks to Beans, right? And then well, Bean pretty much saying, you know what, but I love what he says. I wrote it down. He says Elijah's a human being, and so are you. David slept with
wow,
Bathsheba, and he's remembered for slaying Goliath. Noah was accused of drunkenness, and yet God gave him the ark, right? And then
Yep.
the big one, Solomon had 700 wives, but he was history's greatest, wisest king. I love that.
um,
Ah,
yeah,
it just
Yeah.
hits you by this punch, right? And
Oof.
last thing, and then I'll shut up, right? So speaking of Elijah now, because yeah, I mean Malcolm going up the ladder, he talked to Elijah like, yo, what's going on, right? But I love how Elijah justifies his actions. He says, after me there will be no more. I must plant my seed in fertile soil. It is only the fulfillment of prophecy. I love that. I love that. There's a hypocrisy of it all, and how it just kind of
it's
blows and
insane.
how Malcolm is just being exposed it by the second. I love that. Yeah, into one of those moments, guys.
I just like I feel like there's so much personal devastation for Malcolm because like he wants to believe and he was drawn into this religion thinking it was all these great things, and then like as the scandal happens and as it all unravels, yeah, it's I love how both Spike Lee in the writing and Denzel Washington in the performance do bring out that this is personally devastating, right? Like
Yeah.
this is really hard for him to deal with and process and like to believe, right? Like yes, like believing all this and actually being like this was all built on hypocrisy because like he sees through Elijah Muhammad's bullshit. Like Elijah Muhammad could say whatever he wants about prophecies and is planting his seed, but like Malcolm very like recognizes and like sees him as a hypocrite, and like that doesn't like that doesn't change, right? Like he's like he recognizes his hypocrisy, and he can't, and like the difficulty he has in processing that is so personally devastating, and I really appreciate that about the movie. Like it really connects so well.
Yeah. So we get a great bit of character development afterwards, right? So Malcolm publicly announces that he is his own Muslim, so to speak, right? So he
Yes.
is free of the grip that Elijah had on him, right? There's a great moment actually where he even apologizes to the Negro leaders he insulted earlier in the film, because yeah, it's
Yes.
hinted that he called out, MLK for his,
Right.
turn the other cheek approach to, dealing with hostility towards black people, right? And then we get, one of the film's, greatest moments actually, where he goes on the pilgrimage to Mecca, right? I love the use of 60 millimeter footage, and it's not just a stylistic choice,
Yes.
but because, well, these 2 guys who are following, these 2 white guys, I assume the feds, but Malcolm thinks that they from the CIA. But I love that, Spike keeps it ambiguous. We're not really sure, right? But just this whole sequence is great though, because I mean, this is again Spike saying, "Here's what I am literally going into Mecca, Dread. all the shots, because yeah, it literally is a faithful recreation of the actual footage of Malcolm X, going into Egypt and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they recreate all that stuff, but Spike being a film lover, he put his David Lean spin in it, right? So you get some nice epic
Yes.
wide shots and whatnot, right? I love this scene where he actually meets white Muslims, and there's a great, well, actually throughout, it's
Yeah.
actually based off of the biography of, well, not the biography, sorry, but the letter that he sent back to Betty, which Betty read to the nation, right? Whereas, like, yeah, I met Muslims who had the fairest of skin and the bluest of eyes, and it's like, yeah, it don't even matter about skin color, you know what I mean? I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, this
really
white
good.
woman who literally converted to Islam, right? You could literally see in this moment how just that experience just changed his whole viewpoint on Islam. Like I love that. You know what I mean?
Well, changes his view on Islam and like changes his outlook on like what the solution to racism is. Like
Right.
I mean, they don't talk about it in the film as much. I don't think as much as, but like Malcolm X was actually one of the one of the leaders who very much advocated for the nation of New Africa, which was this whole idea that
Yeah.
there was no way you could reconcile the differences between white and black people peacefully, and the only thing that could be done was for the American government to give like the black America its own literal country within the United States that they would be able to live in and govern as their own. And this was like an actual thing that Malcolm X believed and advocated for. But like going on that pilgrimage and getting to get a sense of like brotherhood and the idea that like racial and the idea that like something bigger than race could be like the key to like healing and the key to like actually like bridging those divides and like bringing those like issues to an end is like really really powerful. It's like a defining moment. It's like it becomes a defining moment in his life, and like the whole like I am my own Muslim thing, and like it just becomes this fine because like then he starts to realize. I mean, I don't think he never dropped the like that kind of like searing practical approach to like how to deal with racism that he had before. And I don't think he dropped the violence like he dropped some of his like advocating for violence, but he did stop the idea that there couldn't be white allies in the fight against injustice. And he did kind of softened his stance on that anyway. And he did think that there were like that the solution was reconciliation and overcoming those problems rather than like assuming that it was a done deal and that there was no way that could be done at all, rather than like rather than like creating another nation within the United States,
Right.
like that kind of thing.
Right. So even with this reboot, though, Malcolm still has fears of retaliation from the nation, right? There's one scene where you see where Spike Lee, replicates the iconic shot of Malcolm by the window, rifle in hand, right?
Yeah.
Um, and there's one line afterwards that's just so dark and ironic, though, but it sums up Malcolm's conflict perfectly, right? I feel it's a Spike Lee line. I don't think it's a Malcolm X line, but what it is where he says, "We had the best organization the black man has ever seen. Niggas ruined it." I love that. That is so blunt, and yet it sums up the entire film right there. That's such a Spike Lee line, but it totally works. I love that, right? And then, well, one night now, Malcolm is woken up by a noisy house, and it mirrors the scene what we saw earlier on where the Klansmen invaded his father's house, right? And yeah, I mean, it's literally Molotov cocktails being thrown to at this house. Well, two actually were thrown at this house now, and but it's not really you're still not sure who it is through it. Like when I watch it, I swear it was a white man who threw it, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong, right? But ultimately, Malcolm blames it on the nation. He has an attack on his family, right? But this is actually true. There's a subsequent interview with Beans, and Beans come out and say, "Yo, this actually is a publicity stunt, Like this is on the part of Malcolm actually. Like he legit say, "Oh, is Malcolm pulling a publicity stunt shit?" I was like, "Wow, wow, just wow." You know what I mean? And then after that, now we see the five men who will assassinate Malcolm, right?
Right.
I believe most, if not all of them, were shown as members of the nation during the film, right?
I
And
believe they. I believe
hence,
that I believe in real life they
right,
were members of the nation. I believe.
right, because I in my mind, I keep thinking that maybe they hire some thugs, if I will use the term, they hire some outside hitmen, if you will, now, to do the job now, so they won't pin everything entirely on them. I could be wrong, right?
Right. So well,
But
that's a big conspiracy back and forth, right, about who was doing what and why. A lot of people think the FBI was involved and CIA was involved, and well, whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
right, exactly, exactly. And then we get to the final speech section of the film. That's all I'll call it,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is just perfectly put together, though. You could just, okay, you know it's gonna happen, eh? You know it's gonna happen, eh? But it builds it so slowly and meticulously, Jed. You're just like, all right,
Right.
oh shit is gonna happen, right? But really, at the heart of it all, you get a true sense of how Malcolm felt before and during. Well, I should say before that speech, right, and leading up to his death, right? He knows he's gonna die, right? But yet he insists
Yes.
on delivering the speech, right? Because it's the truth, and he knows he has to deliver it, right? Um, and I love that this is the only time in the film where you actually see Spike use the whole dolly shot thing where the camera
Yeah.
is right in front of Denzel, and you could tell that he's in his own world. And there's this
Right.
brilliant satiric moment now where this elderly woman sees him and is like, "Are you okay, son?" It's like, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." It's like, "Don't worry, you're gonna be okay, man. You're gonna be fine. Jesus will save you." I
Mhm.
love that. I love that. And it just ends
Yeah.
like that, like. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those brilliant, it's just so ironic, but I love it at the same time, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then, well, before he even like delivers his speech at all, right? The one of the assassins creates this ruckus. I think he lets off this sort of bomb, if you will, the smoke bomb, sorry, right? And then two of the guys show up with pistols and well, sorry, one guy roll up with a shotgun. Hit it. I think it hits. One shot hits Malcolm in the heart now, and then two other guys roll up and they start busting shots off of some pistols, right? And I would just like the outcome of the riot scene in Do the Right Thing, especially like in that film where you heard Ruby D just yelling, "No, no!" You know what I mean? Just hearing
Right.
Angela Bassett crying like that, boy. I won't lie,
Damn.
it was really really heartbreaking to see, but
If there's any
and fun
takeaway, if
fact,
there's
fun fact,
any
fun fun.
takeaway from this episode, it's that
Uh,
whether it's Black Panther 2 or Malcolm X, Angela Bassett is an absolute powerhouse of a human being.
yes, she is, boy. She
Oh my
is. She
god.
is. Oh my God, yeah. But fun fact, right? This is a weird, it's an interesting qualities of the film, right? Because they kind of imply that Elijah was dying, right? Because I think there's two moments where you see him like coughing, you know what I mean? And what the last scene involving, it was just him on his bed coughing violently, right? And you see a few of the initiatives, guys supporting him, right? I think Beans is there, right? But actually, he was alive though. After Malcolm got killed, because in the Malcolm X documentary I mentioned before, he was interviewed, right? And he denied the initials involved in all of this, right? But it's one moment I had to write this down. Well, not word for word, but basically what he says. He pretty much said that, oh, well, because Malcolm preached violence, he lost his life due to violence. I was
Good.
like, wow, boy. Wow, boy, Elijah,
Bullshit.
boy. Jesus.
Bullshit.
Nah, boy, Elijah, boy.
Yeah,
That
I was
was
just
cool.
sitting
That
there
was real
like,
cool. You know?
it's like that's bold, man. Like God. Ugh.
I know, right? Like how you could say that, man. Jeez, right? But
Oof.
anyway, but speaking of do the right thing now, we get a truly powerful epilogue, right? And it's from the late great Ossie Davis, right? And what he does, he delivers MLK's um, eulogy, right, which he did in tribute to Malcolm X, right?
Mm.
And here's the funny thing about it, right? In the Malcolm X doc himself, Ossie Davis actually read the same eulogy out as well, right?
Right.
But
Oh
in this
wow.
case here, you're seeing imagery of Malcolm X as well, the real Malcolm X and all that kind of stuff, right? And is that coupled with Terrence Blanchard's music by I Will Lie though, man, tears, I
Mm.
get man tears watching that sequence where I just couldn't help it, right? And even better in terms of this film now, Kid Ticket is just all about Malcolm X and America, right? Because it kind of cuts to a shot like in contemporary times with like this large crowd out in the street, with placards like Malcolm X, Malcolm X, Malcolm X, and then it show like out of the blue just cuts to Soweto, though. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
I
Whoa,
lost
whoa,
my
whoa,
goddamn
whoa,
mind.
whoa,
I love
whoa.
when Nelson Mandela's cameo in Malcolm X blew my goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
Like
when I saw that for the first time, I went nuts. I was like, mops.
like
again, Spike Lee, dude, this is your sixth film, and you say no.
Spike
I
Lee's
want Nelson Mandela in the end of my
Spike
movie.
Spike Lee's cameo game has always been insane, right? Like everyone, like we were talking earlier about, like, wait, Christopher Plummer's in this movie. I mean, Christopher Plummer worked with Spike Lee multiple times. You get like all these like crazy cameos, like Harry Belafonte in Black Klansman, but Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
and I love how he's not playing Nelson Mandela. He's playing like just like a Soweto school teacher or whatever. And I'm
Right.
like, oh my god! But like
And
Nelson,
that,
so it
that,
is a
couldn't be, that couldn't be much time after he came out of prison, huh?
no, it couldn't have
Yeah.
like, and that was still like that would have been like the fact that would have been it would have been around the time that he was like had that sit down interview with Cast, like around the time or maybe a little before, where he like met Castro and they just carefully talked about when Castro was going to go visit South Africa. Like that was a thing that happened, and I'm just like, just jaw on the floor when I saw that. Just like, what the what? Whoa! Wait a minute! Wait a minute! Man.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get to Nelson, bit at the end, right? We get the denouement, right, where you have this American school teacher and he's teaching, she's teaching these kids about Malcolm X Day, right, which is May the 19th, right? Spike does a little, tribute to Spartacus, so it's like,
Yep.
I'm Malcolm X, right?
Yep.
But again, cutting from America to South Africa, you see two or three, South African children saying, I am Malcolm X, right? And the first time I saw it, I was like, it could have just stopped there with the eulogy, right? But then it goes on with the I'm Malcolm X, right? And over the years, I grew to really appreciate this moment, right?
Yes.
Because yes, you've seen everything from the past, but no, now you're gonna see why this matters now in '92, right? When this film came out, right?
Right. Well, because one of Malcolm X wasn't just advocating for the liberation of Black Americans. He was very much Kwame Ture was the same way. He was
Right.
very much in the forefront of like Pan African solidarity and unity. Like he was very involved and very like he was like, not only do we need like Black Americans liberated, but we need Black lead like we need like African nations to be free of white colonialism. It led to some like I I don't know if like Malcolm X supported like Mobutu Sese Seko, for example. I mean, obviously, like that kind of Pan African solidarity thing kind of did lead to some people that we now know as dictators kind of had like the good graces of American Black activists. But no, it is for me. It is a very important touch because it does remind us that yeah, Malcolm X wasn't just for the liberation of Black Americans. Malcolm X was also was like a Black solidarity transatlantic figure, and like remembering everyone that he is important in different parts of Africa, and especially like even and in South Africa as well, is a really important point as well. And like that's one of the reasons like I really love that whole sequence.
Agreed. And now we get to the final moment now where Nelson actually does something pretty interesting now. He actually delivers a Malcolm X quote, right? One of his famous quotes, right? But interestingly, the last bit, right? What I'll get into, he does not say, but I'll get to why in a bit, right? So this is where he says, we declare our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence. And then it stops, and then it cuts to the actual footage of Malcolm X himself saying, by any means necessary, right?
Right.
Now, I found out after the fact that Nelson actually was a little uncomfortable seeing by any means necessary. So that's why they cut back to that shot, that bit of footage, and that's where the movie ends actually, right? And you're just hearing this powerful music, and also points for actually incorporating Arrested Development, right, with their song Revolution. I also remember when that song came out in '92 and how big a deal that was, right? I mean, it wasn't as big as Tennessee, but I mean, it was Arrested Development, and again, Afrocentricity in rap music, right? So there we go, right? Also, just showing just how on the pulse Spike Lee was in terms of music, right? So in closing, yes, Malcolm X is his magnum opus. It is his greatest film, bar none. And that's not to say that he hasn't been a great film afterwards, but nah, this one in particular was, and again, the most amazing thing about this film for me now, just looking at recapping it, is this is your sixth film, Dread, and you not even
Yes.
like you even have 10 years into your career, and you say no, this is the time right now. You know what I mean? Black America is going through this reawakening. It is a black culture. Let's strike now while the iron is hot. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what I'm gonna do next, but this is a film that I have to make. Right? To hell with me, making films for the next 15, 20 years. I want to make this film right now, Dread. And despite the ups and downs, you know what I mean, he was able to pull it off, right? um Denzel Washington, I didn't even bring it up in my notes, right? um he is just fantastic in this though, from start to end, right? I just love that the film shows you that transition from when he's this
Yes.
hustler named Red and all the shady shit that he was involved in, to where he becomes, Malcolm X, and how he becomes a martyr at the end of it all, right? Yeah, you buy into this transition, and Denzel just owns every single scene that he's in, right? It's a shame to this day, you can look back now and be like, why was this man, why did he win Best Actor, right? That's one of the big,
Right.
controversies as far as Oscar history, right? Because yeah, they give it to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman, right? I mean, I love Al Pacino, but I only saw that shit once. I don't remember a single thing about Scent of a Woman outside the fact that he was blind. I think he was blind. I think that was a big deal. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
or
don't remember a
something.
single thing about that movie. But I will always remember Denzel in this movie, right? Um, the cast is great, man. What is Delroy Lindo, Al Freeman Jr., Albert Hall, Teresa Randall, whoever it is, everybody came through. Even Spike Lee himself, everybody came through and did the A game, right? Ernest Dickerson, I forgot to mention, he was the DP for this boy, knocked it out the park. Literally at the end of the day before I get to read it, everybody knew what the assignment was. We have to do the best adaptation of the autobiography of Malcolm X, that novel from Alex Haley, and we have
Yes.
to do right by this man. We have to put out the best film. We have to make the best film that we could ever make, right? And that is exactly what what it did. 30 years from now, we are looking at this, and it still holds up. It still holds up to this day. And imagine 30 years from now, yeah, we're gonna say the same thing, right? So rating wise, yes, this gets my highest rating, 5 out of 5, the equivalent of a 10 out of 10. See this movie before you die, unless you're genuinely uncomfortable with subject material that deals with race and politics. Other than that, though, I mean, this film will inspire you. It will motivate you. Like, I felt motivated after watching this movie. I felt like, yes, I want to talk about this film. I feel like I want to be part of something that actually matters, right? And this inclusion, much, I mean, big shout out to Spike Lee, for again just saying, look, I want to make this. I want to make this shit. I feel like I'm the best person to do this, but I have to prove it to myself, prove it to the cast, prove it to the crew, and especially to Warner Brothers, right? With this, right? And yeah, he did that. He did that, right? So yeah, this is a film that we will look towards for years and years to come, and still feel that energy, man. Just feel that raw
Oh
spirit that
yeah.
Malcolm X just gave to the world, right? So yeah, that's all I could say. Ricardo, final thoughts and rating on Malcolm X.
Yeah, yeah. Again, a true masterpiece. Something that just holds up. Again, yes, it is Spike Lee's best film. Miss Magnum Moses, lack of better term, and he just like absolutely understand the conceits of nuance, like with and how to utilize nuance
Yes.
while making a clear case at the same time. You're not. It's not milly mouted nonsense. It's still solid case has been made, but at the same time, he understands how to square these ideas with these storytelling beats and makes it work for what it is though. Yeah, 5 out of 5, love it. No complaints here.
All right, and to close things off,
Ah,
CC, your final thoughts and rating on Malcolm X.
like I said, something you said a couple times is that like making a film like this without even like barely 10 years into your career and like not even and only as your sixth movie is so. It's one of the things I've always respected about Spike Lee. Spike Lee never waited around for other people to hand him opportunities. Like Spike Lee kind of decided that he was going to break into Hollywood and he was going to get opportunities himself. He would like wherever he went to find them, he would get his own opportunities, and he would like, even if he had to break down doors or ask Michael Jordan to help him finish funding the film, like Spike Lee was always going to do. And again, it's like, you know, by any means necessary. Like that was always so. Like Spike Lee was always the perfect filmmaker to make this project, and the fact that he decided to do it at that age, kind of a little bit of the Orson Welles thing of Orson Welles explaining why Citizen Kane was so great, where he was like, I was too young to know what you couldn't do.
Right.
And like how that was honestly like that being brilliant, and that being and that being like really, really, really cool. It's a movie that personally, like anytime I'm trying to think about like autobiographies or like historical films, it's a movie that personally inspires me a lot. It's a movie I come back to. It's a movie I think about. Again, I literally, one of the big driving films when I was putting together my master's thesis at grad school for film, it's one of the reasons I keep revisiting Spike Lee, because like no matter what films he made that I am less fond of, I mean, looking at you, Ganja and Hess, I will always remember him as the man who made Malcolm X, and he has that respect. And like the amount of daring and the amount of just like focus and the way he like brings the story to life without waiting for anyone to give him permission or anyone to tell him or anyone to like tell him what he couldn't do, whether it was things like, you know, having like making this movie at all, or like using the footage of the Rodney King trials, or like having Nelson Mandela cameo in it. I actually disagree with the one thing you said when you were like, see this before you die. I mean, unless you're uncomfortable with race stuff or no, I think that's the perfect person to watch this movie. It's a confrontational movie. I think this movie needs to be, if you're like the kind of person who's like uncomfortable talking about race or uncomfortable talking about politics, watch this movie, because you need to be upset. You need to be confronted. You need to like actually deal with deal with like what is going on here in the world, and like this side of things. Like, and I think this is one of the perfect movies to do that, because like Ricardo said, it handles the subject matter with nuance. It's also great because it does open the door for other movies, like biographies of like important Black figures and even controversial Black figures, right? Like
Judas and the Black Messiah, anyone?
Oh yeah, Judas and the Black Messiah owes. I mean, it's much more conventionally made, but not in a bad way. But Judas and the Black Messiah would not exist without Malcolm X. I low-key, even though it's a movie that kind of has a little defanged at times, Selma would not exist without this movie.
True.
I feel like Michael Mann, even though Michael Mann is a white filmmaker, I feel like Ali with Will Smith owes a certain amount to this film as well. Like Lee didn't just like not wait for people to give him permission. He went and did projects that he knew would like make things easier for the filmmakers who would come after him. And anyone, especially like any Black person making films, owes so much to Spike Lee. And the fact that we can make films about characters, like about people like Malcolm X or Fred Hampton or any of these other figures, is because a movie like Malcolm X broke the door down for us to get in and do that. Masterpiece, 10 out of 10. One of my all-time favorites, like, ever made.
Nice.